Mastering electronic dance music.
Hey, welcome back to Mastering EDM with Logic Pro, and this is the fourth video in the series introducing mixing. So today we're going to be covering compression. Compression is basically automated volume based on what sound is coming in, and I'll show you what that means in a second. So first let me go here and I have basically show you what I have. I have a grand piano here. It's just playing a basic chord pattern. And then I have a bass, really simple bass, and then I have a kick drum. So nothing too amazing here. Compression, I'm gonna pull that up in a second, but first, I'm gonna show it to you in terms of volume. So we have this bass line here, and it, you notice that the volume goes up and down as the notes play. That's kind of a given because the sound changes over time. But essentially what I could do is when it goes up, I could pull it down. So it kind of changes the sound of it. And that's basically what compression does. It watches the volume level and then it changes the volume accordingly. So I'm going to pull open compressor here, and if you see, it's already doing something. You can't quite hear the difference if I just turn it on and off to show you. Well, it sounds, you could hear a little bit of it. But essentially what we have here is we have a variety of tools that help us tweak how much is done when. And so I'll go through the various controls here, and I'll try to focus on what's most important here, and then I'll get into some brief interesting stuff about other things you could do with compression and stuff like that. So first things first, we have you've seen the meter here, and then this is the most obvious tool that you'll look at when you're working on compression. It kind of shows you what you're doing. So I'm going to set everything to basically the plainest form it can be in. And then we have that at default. Okay. So this is basically what it would look like if nothing was happening. And so we have the volume here, and I was showing you we can pull it down as the sound changes. Now what this does is, so we have the attack, which is the speed that we pull it down, the speed, and the release is how long it takes us to move it back up, and the threshold is when we start doing that. So like, okay, at what level do we want to start pulling it down? And the ratio is by how much do we pull it down. So it's basically, if you there's a variety of controls here, and they may be confusing looking, but they're actually relatively simple when you consider it in terms of the volume fader here. Attack is how fast you pull it down. Release is how fast you pull it up. Threshold is when you start to pull it down, and ratio is by how much you start to pull it down. So I'm going to show you what that means practically in applying it, and I also want to cover one other thing in regards to just using compression for what it's meant for, which is, and then I'll talk about over compression and how that can be used stylistically. That's why I have the piano here, because pianos are beautiful when you over compress them, if that's what you're trying to get. So let me go over and show you basically how we can make this bass line sound a bit punchier by using compression. Typically people think, okay, so if we're pulling it down when the audio is going up, doesn't that kind of flatten the sound? Yes, it does. And that's typically what happens when you compress and you don't know what you're doing. But on the other hand, you could also make things punchier, and that's one of the best uses for compressors, because when you have a mix that's really busy, it's hard to get everything to sound clear and nice if nothing's cutting through and punching through. So I'm going to show you basically how to work through and figure out how to get something to sound punchy. So right now we have this bass line going, and the first thing you want to do is pull up the ratio a little bit. That's not doing anything right now because the threshold is at 0 dB, which means that it's not going to start compressing until it hits here. So I'm going to pull this down, and then you'll start gradually hearing changes to the sound. So it kind of just sounds like I'm pulling down the volume right now. And the reason why is because the attack and the release are at the lowest possible setting. So if I turn up the release a bit here, it'll kind of show you, you'll hear more of the compression sound. Let me do this again. It's kind of like it's being stepped on. Let me pull this down and I'll show you what it does. So let's go, instead of going dun 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 dun, it's kind of going dun 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 dun. You hear that? So that's how you squash things. Now, how do you add punch? Well, what you do is you make the attack slower, so when the sound goes when the sound gets louder, you let that first bit through and it's louder, and then basically over time it kind of looks like this this curve that goes like this. It goes up and then down. That's the volume level. Normally with compression, you kind of just flatten it all out, but if you let some through to let there be punch, you get this kind of this bulge shape that almost is similar to a kick drum. When you look at the file, actually let's zoom out here. So what you have is you have initially, it's kind of nasty the way it's showing it right here, but you know, let's just go like this. You have this part that kind of goes up and then down, and then it starts to go back up. So that's what we're basically aiming to do with this. So I'm gonna open up the attack here and you'll see how it gets, instead of being squashed, it starts to get punchier. I'll do it again just to show you the difference here. Now compression, if you can't really hear a difference, that's because compression is one of the harder tools to use and really learn how to hear the difference. Now that's something I'll take getting used to, and I can't, unfortunately, I can't really say a solution to solving that problem and making yourself magically better at figuring out when it's compressing enough, when it's compressing too much. But suffice it to say, one thing I've heard throughout audio is when in doubt, leave it out. So if you're not sure if it's making that much of a difference and you can't tell if it sounds better or worse, just leave it out. That said, I'm going to turn this on and off here completely, and that'll kind of show you if I have it off and if I take it out completely, will it sound better? So let's do that here. So it's kind of, at first you kind of think, okay, it sounds better when you have it off. And that's because if you look at here, right now it's peaking around negative 22 dB. But if I turn this off, it's peaking at negative 21. So what we could do is, actually negative 19 at its highest point. So, so what we can do is we can actually make it more realistic of a comparison and make this so it's at the same volume level when it's playing here. So let me turn this up till it gets to 19. That's 18, it's a little bit too much. We got here, 19, okay. So now we'll compare this and you'll hear what the difference is. So this one kind of sounds like, this one sounds more loose and this one sounds a bit tighter. I was also just messing around just to hear the different sounds you could get. Of course, that one's considerably lower. So if we pull this one up, we'll see what this sounds like. That's 17. That's way too much. Okay, should be close enough. 20, whatever. So that's the main use for compression. You see there, you could do a variety of things with it. You have a couple of different settings I'll briefly cover here. You have knee, which is, it basically smooths out this curve. So normally when you hit the threshold, it automatically starts reducing the volume by a certain amount, and that certain amount is a ratio here. The knee smooths that out and makes it so it gradually starts to get to that level of compression. So this one kind of sounds a bit softer. which may be what you're going for. Now, peak and RMS is two different things here. You have peak, which is it looks at the top of the audio and then it starts compressing based on that. RMS, what it does is it basically looks at the sound over time and what the general volume level is over a longer period of time, and it compresses based on that. So typically you do a lot more compression with peak than you do with RMS. RMS is something you might want to use on vocals because you don't want to squash vocals too much, otherwise they could sound off. RMS would smooth out the volume levels without losing too much of the dynamics of the singer. Auto gain is one of the things that you'll fall in love with because it could do some really neat stuff to your audio. Now I'm going to pull this up to -12 dB and it basically almost maximizes it, which is another form of dynamics. But that gets it really loud, which is why it sounds better theoretically. So let me pull it down to, what's it at night? 18, 17, 14. Wow, that got pretty high. Okay. Okay, so now we'll compare this and you'll see this makes a considerable difference. So this one definitely sounds a lot punchier. Now, as you can see, the only thing that is affected is not just the volume. It's you also get the EQ signature kind of sounds different too, and that's one of the effects of compression. It tends to change the sound signature of a track a little bit. Sometimes you have to EQ considering that, and one of the biggest things that affects is treble and bass. Actually, two of the biggest, but don't mind that. Anyway. Treble, what it typically does with treble and bass is it tends to cut those down a little bit, and it makes the mids more prominent typically. Now there's ways to change what changes here, like how the EQ is affected and stuff. But so we have these different modes, which actually, if you look at this, it changes. And you could also hear that the sound changes drastically too. So we have the Studio FET, which is louder than the Platinum. And it kind of just goes, it's all about which one are you wanting right now and which one sounds best to you. You could just cycle through them and check. So compression is pretty much just as much trial and error as volume and EQ. It's a lot about not necessarily what do I know will work, but more what sounds right to me. So keep that in mind when you're doing that. I'm not going to go over the limiter in this tool because the limiter it has a limiter in an entirely separate tool that's just as functional, and I'll go over that in a minute because I want to try to cover not just compression but dynamics too in general. The one final thing I want to cover here is side chaining, and that allows you to get audio from a different source, and instead of monitoring the audio of this track, it monitors the audio of a different track and applies the compression to the track you have the compressor on. And I'll show you what that's like with this kick drum. That's why I bothered to put it in. Normally I wouldn't because I'm lazy. So what I can do with this one is I'm going to send this to bus 20 because that is what I always send my kick drum to. Bus 20. And I'm going to remove the output so it does not send the output twice. Otherwise, normally what you'd have is you'd have the audio going to bus 20, and then it would go out this channel also into the master mix, and then you get two of them, which would basically increase the volume. So now I'm going to set this to 0, so it's the same volume level as whatever I have this set to. And now, if you hear, there's no difference if I have this on and off. It doesn't do anything. That's because I disabled the output. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this channel here and I'm going to send it through the sidechain. And pay attention when I do this. If you listen right now, the bass kind of like lands on top of the kick drum occasionally, and it goes like really loud. So if you listen, like on the first hit, it gets considerably louder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually do what's called sidechain compression, and now it does the opposite. It reads the kick drum, figures out where that is, and based on that, it starts to compress the bass track. Let's do this. So this is like a huge difference compared to when it's off. It gets that pulsating sound. This is in a lot of EDM, and essentially I can't think of a single track that doesn't employ this when it comes to electro house, because that is extremely prominent. Trance uses it a lot also, so it's something you really need to keep in mind. That's it's that in and out sound that you hear really often. So there's that. Now, before I leave the compressor, I want to talk about over compression. And we have this nice piano here. It's not amazing, but it'll work for what I'm going to show you. And if you notice here, it's compressing a little bit, but it doesn't sound too bad. Now, if I pull up the ratio a lot, I'm going to take off the knee. Now, if you listen to the original, it sounds a lot more free. So you get this really squash sound, and it sounds pretty cool. And this is over compression. Now, it can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing. It depends on if you're doing it intentionally. If you do it accidentally and it sounds good, cool, and you decide to keep it, that's one thing. But if you're trying to compress it to get more, a fuller sound, but you end up over compressing it, it can start to sound nasty. So keep that in mind when you're compressing. And I'll show you here. If I put the a sidechain compressor on this one too, we'll get a really cool effect. Set it to plus 20 here, close down. Why is that? I forgot to set this one to a low attack. That's usually when you sidechain compress, you usually want to set it to a really low attack. So now if we turn off all the compressors, you'll hear what it sounds like before. It sounds really flat, but if we add this, we get this really huge pulsating thing. Now, you want to be careful. It does sound cool, but it might, in this case, I can actually tell right now that I have done way too much sidechain compression, and it kind of pulses in and out too much. Now, I could fix that by going through and tweaking this, but instead I'm going to show you some other dynamics. There's a lot of tools here that cover a variety of different things, but I'm going to pretty much just talk about the limiter right now. I'll briefly, here we go. Multipressor is basically what it does is it's like a mix between EQ and compression. You have different sections that you could compress. So you have the high end here, you could compress a certain amount. It's all the same settings here. You have peak or RMS. If you set it to 0, it's peak. If you set it to 200, it's completely RMS. And then you have the attack, release, threshold. Actually, that's the expand threshold. But if you have the regular threshold, which is up here, and if you have the ratio, it's right there. You could go through and basically choose each frequency range and compress that. So that's what a multipressor does. It's pretty useful, but it's very hard to use. If you think compression is hard to use, the multi-band compression is going to be even harder. I haven't mastered that yet, but I'm getting better. So right now I'm going to pull up a limiter and show you what this does. A limiter is basically like a strong version of compression. You turn up the volume to where you want it, and you basically tell it, it's a lot simpler in the sense of you tell it, I want it to end up at this volume level. And simply, basically all it does is it creates a sort of brick wall, and it won't let anything past that. Whereas a compressor, it just gradually reduces volume as the output gets louder. So I'm going to pull this up and basically just squash the entire mix so you see what goes on here. I'm going to set it at -10 because right now I actually have this boosted. So actually, let's do this. Set it to 0, add gain, just to pull it up by 6, and then pull down the limiter so I could just send this to 0. So if I set this at 0, actually I'm going to set it to -0.1. So that's another thing you can notice here. I have it right now, it's hitting pretty much 0, you can see right now. but at the same time, I could continue to pull it up and it gets louder, even though mathematically it doesn't get louder. So what it's doing there is it's basically removing dynamics and making it sound louder, even though it's technically not getting louder. This is something you will probably do on your end tracks, but you want to be careful that you don't kill the mix, especially bass drums and bass lines. They could start to distort in the bass region if you compress too much. I don't know if you can hear that, but in the low end I could hear some distortion here. That's pretty smooth, so that's reasonable. So that's the limiter. There's an adaptive limiter, which is even more of a brick wall sense. So let's see. I'll pull up the gain here. Just the out ceiling. I could actually leave this one at 0 because it's less likely to peak. But this one you could tell it's distorting terribly. So this one is a lot more sensitive to pushing the volume past what it normally is, but at the same time it uses a different method. So if I actually have a regular limiter and then I throw that on, I could get it even louder. But I need to be careful about how much I do. Now there's one final thing I want to briefly touch on, and that's expanders. Expanders are similar to compression. They work on the idea of pulling the audio up instead of pushing it down, and they're useful for throwing on final mixes. I personally do not like Logic's built-in expander. That could just be me, but there are other. Ozone is probably the largest one when it comes to that. Ozone 6 just recently came out, actually, and that's the industry standard mastering chain, and it's got a really good limiter and expander on there. I don't have that yet. I'd like to have it, but I haven't worked that into my budget yet. When I do, I would totally love to cover working with that, but for now, I'm just gonna have to work with what's in here. So I basically covered all the dynamics that are important here. There are de-essers, duckers. The enveloper is kind of interesting to play with, but they all work with the same fundamentals as this one, just in different formats. So I'm not gonna cover in detail each one and all the settings for each one, because there are lots of tutorials out there that I'll get you that. What I want to get you through is basically I want to get you the foundation so that you can start working with your tracks and really get into them. So right there, it was a pretty long video here, I know, but hopefully that was everything that you need by way of compression and over compression, and how to avoid it and how to work with it. If you have more questions, feel free to ask them. And I will try to get back to you and answer any questions you may have as to working with various instruments, because with each instrument it's considerably different. For instance, when you're working with a kick drum and you compress, you have a lot more to keep in consideration than when you would a bass line. A bass line is typically a lot simpler to compress. And then guitars are another story. So if you have questions, I could try to answer those. I can't be 100% certain with all those because I'd have to actually listen to the track and try compression myself. But anyway, just trying to get the basics down and make that as clear as I can. The next video is actually going to be on distortion, and as an effect and as a tool for mixing, and bad cases of distortion. So I'll probably use the same project in the next video here just because I have it up and it's working for me right now. So I'll cover that in the next video here. But for now, thank you for watching, and feel free to leave comments, subscribe, and everything like that. See ya.